Why don't you take a seat and tell me what appears to be the problem? Let's talk about consult the doctor. I have 4 questions that I think are a nice mix of some pen problems and a bit more philosophical stuff. So let's start off with question number 1. Is baby's bottom really an issue of tipping only? And there is a follow-up question, but first let's talk about baby's bottom really quickly. You have a nib has 2 tines, and welded to the end of those tines is tipping material. If that tipping material gets over polished, then you get something that looks like a lowercase omega. Look it up if you don't know what that looks like. And the problem with that is that over polishing rounds off the edges of the tipping a bit too much. Ink suspended between the tines does not fully hit the page, and as a result, the nib will be very smooth because it's over polished, but it tends to skip and hard start a lot. That's an issue. It's not a pleasant writing experience, very smooth, but doesn't work very well unless you have super absorbent paper which really sucks the ink out of the pen. So that's baby's bottoms. Now the follow-up question was, you see, I have no ink in the nib slit. Okay, so that is a problem, right? Nobody likes a dry slit, and the problem with that is really important because ink gets drawn onto the page through capillary action. And if the slit between the tines, I'm on purpose doing this, okay? But if that slit is dry, there's no ink suspended in it, it's not going to be sucked onto the page. Now, is it possible that this particular nib does have baby's bottoms? Yes, it is. It is possible it does that. But my guess is that there is something else going on, because if the ink is not even making it to the tips of the tines, I think there's something different going on. Now, the reason I did this earlier was the tines should kind of point towards each other. Now, I have found that there are different opinions on that. Some people say the tips of the tines should just touch. And other people say, no, the tips of the tines should just not touch. But vitally, if you look at the 2 tines, they should not look like this. So if they look like this and they diverge from each other, so the 2 tips go in different directions, then you have a problem. Whether the 2 tips touch or not touch, they should move towards each other. If they move away from each other, that hampers capillary action. Capillary action means that liquid gets sucked up between the tines, but for that to work, they need to taper towards each other. If they taper away from each other, that does not work well. The ink flow will just stop. So my guess for this particular nib is it could be over-polished tines. It could have, over-polished tips, sure. But I don't think that's what's causing the issue. I think the issue is that the nib may have been sprung or bent out of shape, or may just be ground a little weirdly, or the tines are just a little weird. Make sure they're aligned correctly. Make sure that the feed is nice in the center of the bottom of the nib, and have a close look. Maybe if you can with a loop, and see if there is a gap in a V shape between those tines. If there is, that's a problem, and your pen will never write properly. So then you need to get that fixed, send it back to the company where you got it, or send it to a nibmeister who can fix that kind of problem with the eyes closed. But I bet you that's what it is. Okay, next question. This was a longer question, but it comes down to, do expensive pens like, say, a Pelikan M800 or a Visconti Homo sapiens, etc., really write better than a Faber-Castell Emotion? Well, that really depends on how you define a couple of concepts. But here's what I have found. The Faber-Castell steel nibs are incredibly pleasant. They're very, very smooth writers. And the Emotion has a very nice stainless steel nib. They're all very smooth. I love their broad nibs. They're incredibly pleasant to use. So if you define quote unquote write better as write more smoothly, you might be hard pressed to find nibs that write more smoothly. Although you can polish a nib more and more and more, and it'll become smoother and smoother and smoother up to a point. Up to the point where you go back to baby's bottoms and the pen doesn't write anymore, right? But anyway. So if that's what you're looking for, smoothness, well, then there are very smooth nibs. Pelican M1000 nibs are very smooth, for example. So I wouldn't say that you cannot outdo a Faber-Castell nib, but it is certainly true that those nibs are very smooth and a lot of people find them very pleasant to use. But what you do have to understand when it comes to fountain pens or anything else in life really, at some point there are diminishing returns and you can spend more and more and more, but you don't get much more. If you buy a $500 pen with a really well-tuned solid gold nib, you will find that to be a very pleasant, reliable writer. A Faber-Castell Emotion is cheaper than that, but I think I'm yet to see a Faber-Castell nib that was not tuned properly. Those are very pleasant, reliable writers. If you buy, you could say maybe the $500 pen, let's just say for the sake of argument that it writes more pleasantly than the Faber-Castell nib. I kind of doubt it would, but let's say just for the sake of argument that it does. You find it just a smidgen smoother or nicer or wetter, whatever. Okay, then buy a $5,000 pen. They exist. Is that going to write 10 times better than a $500 pen? Probably not. But you're buying a certain sense of luxury, whether that's because of the specific materials used, the craftsmanship, limited edition filling system, all of the above, whatever, it doesn't matter. That pen will be more expensive and will write differently. I doubt you're going to find it, like I said, to quantify it 10 times better than a $500 pen. At that point, you're buying luxury. And this applies to everything, right? You can buy a $200 suit, you can buy a $2,000 suit. $2,000 suit is going to have fancier materials, and sure, you might expect the fit to be a little better, etc. I'm not talking about bespoke stuff, I'm just talking off the rack stuff still. There will be differences, but you're buying more luxury, right? Better materials, etc. If you then buy a $20,000 suit that is bespoke and is handmade just for you, you measured, etc., well, then it's going to be even better. But that is a whole different class of thing. Fountain pens are not really bespoke like that. They're not made for one specific user, typically, right? So that's what I would say. I hope that is a sensible answer. Next question. Why are there such regional price differences between pens? Why don't retailers push back? And the specific example given is a Pilot Custom 845, which costs $375 on Japanese Amazon versus $900 at Goulet. This is not to single out Goulet. I think you may be talking about what they sell. I know this because I just looked into it for a review. The 845 they sell is the Urushi, and that is indeed $900, but that's a different pen from the standard the standard 845. Having said that, there are regional differences. Japanese pens, Sailor Pilot Platinum, for example, Japanese pens are way more expensive in Europe than they are in Japan, and often they're also much more expensive in Europe than they are in, say, the US. Now, partially this is because of European value-added tax tends to be quite high. When I left the Netherlands, value-added tax there was 21%, so a sales tax of 21% on a $500 pen is a lot of money. And where I live now, it's 5%, so that already makes a big difference. But that's not really what you're getting at. What you're getting at is the difference in prices between countries irrespective of tax. I once had a conversation with a pen vendor in the Netherlands who said, yeah, tell me about it. This is not our choice. It's not us making these pens 200-300 euros more expensive than they are in, say, the US, but it's the distributor. They import the pens. They basically set prices, right? We have to purchase those pens from them, and they make them that expensive. And there are different theories. There was one along the lines of the Japanese pen brands don't really want their pens to sell outside of Japan, which sounds very counterintuitive to me, so I don't know if that's true. But I can see how you would say, listen, we're a brand from country X, we focus on country X, and beyond that, people pay a premium. You see this in a lot of different products. So I understand that point. I can't say I fully comprehend it, but I understand that there might be something like that going on. So remember, there is always the sort of middleman. We have the company making it, then there is the importer slash distributor, then there is the shops, etc. Yeah, why don't retailers push back? Well, that's basically what I asked that specific vendor, and he said, yeah, you think I don't? We do this all the time. We keep asking them why are these specific pens so expensive? They're much cheaper in the US. And the response from the distributors typically is, okay, then don't buy them. Then don't buy them. But then understand that your competitor does. So you're going to miss out on all those sales. I'm not trying to make this sound more aggressive than it is. I don't think Sailor is like, we're gonna, like, it's not like that. But it is a reality. Some of these pens are much more expensive. And I remember reviewing the Pilot Custom 823. I don't remember exactly what it cost, but it was way more expensive in the Netherlands, where I was at the time, than it was in Japan or in the US. And I pointed that out in the review and I said, this is not worth it for this price. And a lot of people said, no, I wouldn't pay that. I love that pen. I wouldn't pay that for it, but I bought it for like $200 cheaper, right? So it is an issue. It is actually genuinely an issue, I think, and it's unfortunate. But now with online retailing, it becomes easier to buy stuff, directly from the source, so to speak. Okay, final question for today. Are there any pens that you are eager to review? I'm eager to review what people send me these days. I can't say that I know this is a boring answer, but I can't say, oh, there is that one pen that I really always wanted to review. I genuinely don't believe I have that. What I find these days is that I get very excited about certain pens that I thought I wouldn't be excited about. Here we have a pen. I mentioned this in another Consult the Doctor episode. This was sent to me fairly recently. Scrivener. I don't know how to pronounce that, but Scriveiner. This is their EDC model. A bit like a Kaweco Sport, to the extent that the cap is almost the size of the pen. So it's smaller when you use it unposted, and it's a full-size pen when you do post it. This has it's fairly affordable. I mean, I know that's a relative term, but they're fairly affordable. I think they're about, I have it here. I don't want to give you false information. Right now, Amazon, £48. So that's not super cheap. But Humble number 5 Schmidt nib in medium, and guess what? It's super smooth. It doesn't skip. It doesn't hard start. It doesn't run dry as I write with it. It has no issues. It's solidly made, all metal. I'm thinking there's some brass in there because it's really quite heavy. Lovely solid pen. I find this more exciting than some of the $500-600 pens I've recently reviewed, because this pen writes out of the box and does so every time, and it's super smooth as you write with it. So I find that kind of stuff excites me. Oh, this is relatively affordable, surely more affordable than a pen 10 times its cost, which then skips, hard starts, and all those things. So that's it. I'm sorry that's not a direct answer, but there are no real pens that I'm super eager to review. And I sometimes see things that come out and I think, oh, that's very, very pretty. What is it? Navalur. There's nearly a Freudian slip there. They send me pictures of new pens they're releasing, and I was asked not to share them yet, so I'm not showing the pictures here. They look beautiful, and I was excited about those because they just look very, very pretty. So they're sending me one to try out, and that's great. I'm more excited about that than the super expensive, fancy, oh, here's another writer's edition or whatever. And that may just be me, but that's it. So that's it for today. Let me know what you're excited about. And do weigh in on regional price differences and such, because that really is a strange topic, I find. I hope this was useful, and I'm glad to see you later. Bye.